What's up guys, today we're going to be adding on to our previous Gimp tutorial video. If you haven't seen that video, go ahead and check it out. It covers a lot of stuff that I'm not going to necessarily walk you through in this video. So if you're confused at any point during this video, go and check out the previous one. I highly recommend skimming through it or watching it at a faster speed. It's a longer video, but it does cover a lot of stuff, and I'm not going to cover it again in this video. So if you get confused, I sincerely apologize, but you can also just watch the previous video. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing perspective text along a path. So in the previous video, what we did was we did 3D perspective text, sort of making 2D text have the illusion of being 3D. Now we're going to do the same thing, but this time along a path, making a curve. So I'll show you what that looks like. New 1280 by 720, resolution 3000, fill with transparency. I set up my guides, vertical 50, horizontal 50, view, snap to canvas edges, and now we can begin. So I'm going to make a path. I'm going to go over here to Paths tool, and I'm just going to go to the bottom left and bottom right of my canvas. I'm going to take the middle of the path, and I'm going to scoot it up to the middle of our canvas. So we have a nice arch. I don't know if you can see that, but it's a nice little arch. You can mess around with the curve of the path. I'm not going to do it because I don't want to have to undo it with these little armies here. So if you move it around, it'll adjust the curve of your path. This is really good for cropping if you want to do a really good, really clean looking cropping job. But for right now, we're just going to use it for text. So let's make our background invisible. Let's create a new layer. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add text. I want to use Monsterot Heavy. It's a pretty juicy looking font. We're not going to do 200, that might be a little too big. Let's just go to 150. Color is going to be white. We're going to justify it left for the purpose of this example. Make our text box, and then we will throw on all caps and type in perspective. Now, one thing you're going to notice when you start snapping your text to a path is that sometimes it'll be off, but you can easily fix that by putting in a space, and I'll show you what I mean. Let's select our text tool and make sure our text box is active like so, and then we are going to just right click and do text along path. So as you can see, as I was talking about earlier, our text is sort of off to the side. I don't know if there's a better way of fixing this, but what I usually do is just go back and delete the path, or it'll, if you just do it again immediately, it'll be all funky. And I'll show you what I mean. Let's just add a space, and then we could do text along path again. So this is what our new path looks like if you don't go back and delete the previous path. So we're gonna delete our previous paths. And we're gonna add, we already added one space, so we're just gonna add about 2 more. And for some reason, if you push space without making sure, like double checking that your text box is highlighted, it deletes the path. I don't know why, but that's what it does for me. So we're just going to add 2 more spaces, right click, text along path, until, and then go back and delete it if it's not right until we get it to about where we want it. So that looks about right. We might could add 1 more space. That seems about right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our main channel, or our layers channel, and we're going to make this invisible, put this layer up on the top, go back to paths, right click, path to selection. So that has our text path is now available to fill in with white or whatever we want to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill it with a bunch of different colors. Let's just go purple, let's do a blue, let's do green. Now I'm just doing this for the purpose of the example. You can do whatever you want. You can do a solid color, you can do a gradient if you want, anything you want to do. Yeah, basically. So I've run out of colors, so I'm just going to click the color picker, and then I'm going to pick the previous colors that I've already used. sort of a lazy way, if you don't remember which colors you use, to just go back and use the same one. Okay, select none. We're gonna make our path invisible. So here we go, here's our new layer. We are going to alpha to selection, layer, crop to selection. We're gonna move this just above center so that we can rotate it to make sure that it's not off to one side. I'm gonna click rotate, and we're gonna go to the left just a little bit. That might be too far. See what that looks like. Better, but not perfect. I say that looks about right. So alpha to selection, layer, crop to selection, select none, move tool. I'm gonna put it right on the 50% line. Yeah, and that looks about centered. Okay, so now what we can do is basically everything we did in the previous video when it comes to motion blurring our drop shadow. We're gonna go alpha to selection, new layer, go down below, and I want to increase it by about, I like to use 5. And then let's do a sort of dark gray fill. Now, I like to duplicate this so that it still has a border before we start motion blurring our drop shadow, or creating our drop shadow. Now I know that the center of my screen is 640 by 360. You want to make sure when you're doing this that you have blur outward, that you're on zoom for the blur type, and blur outward is turned off. I'm going to use a length of about 100. You can use whatever you want. That basically determines how far it's blurred. It's pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to click OK. And there we have our blur. Like I said in the previous video, all you have to do is make sure that this is the only visible layer, duplicate it over and over again, and merge visible layers to make that solid. And now we have our perspective sort of drop shadow. Now if it looks kind of boring, what you can do is go to foreground to transparent on your gradient tool. Use the path that you used earlier so that it's uniform. Right click, path to selection. Create a new layer. And then on this layer, it's going to have the same arch as our text. We can do, since we're on foreground to transparent, let's just do simple black and white. Let's do black from the bottom to the middle, and then we'll just invert that and do white from the top to the middle. Like none. Now we have what we can use as a sort of grain merge gradient on our drop shadow. So let's make everything invisible. Now what I like to do, instead of just moving this up and then, you know, clicking grain merge, which you absolutely can do, I'll show you what that looks like right now. Looks like that. And then basically you would merge that down and then duplicate it over and over again. Or you can scale it to have a more, it's almost like a more contained version of what you're already doing. So we're gonna scale it just to the top half, or you can scale it to your text, which in my opinion looks a little bit better, but you might think that that's not the right technique for you. But that's just what I've been doing. So now our gradient is scaled to about around where our text is, and then we can grain merge, and it's a lot more obvious that way. Another thing you can do is mess around with all the different effects. You can do hard light, multiply, burn, darken only, lighten only. Again, all of these do different things. So let's use darken only. And then we are going to merge that down with our drop shadow. This is what it looks like all together. So it looks a bit more realistic. You can still see the lines of where the gradient is. If you don't want to do that, what you can do is instead of doing it after the fact, which I found is probably better. I was just showing you sort of a corner cutting way of doing it. We can delete our drop shadow that we made, duplicate it again so that we have a fresh start, apply the darken only gradient to the original copy of the drop shadow. Looks a bit more realistic like that. And then do the motion blur. So I'll show you what that looks like. Let's merge down, and then we're gonna go ahead and filters, repeat motion blur, duplicate, and merge. That looks a lot better than what we had originally. Now, if you want to add the same gradient to your text, basically before you would motion blur it, all you'd have to do is use the gradient layer, scale it to the text like we did earlier, and then grain merge or whatever effect you want to use. But basically for now, this is good enough for the example. We're not going to go too crazy in this tutorial because I don't want it to be a 45-minute long video. So basically that's it. Let's take away our guides and let's give her a look-see. So again, what you can do, instead of just leaving like this, you can add a shadow layer to give it even more of a perspective illusion. So let's go to a bit of a darker gray, just fill in the background. Go ahead and grow that by 5 instead. Fill in the background. Another new layer behind that, goes straight to black. Fill that in, select none, and then blur under Gaussian blur, the back layer. Let's do a blur about 55. Okay, and then it looks even more 3D with the shadow and everything like that. Then we can merge visible layers, alpha to selection, layer, crop to selection, select none, and then we can scale it. Let's go to about 1,000. So that actually doesn't look half bad. I was kind of rushing through the tutorial, but it looks pretty good. It doesn't look very jagged or anything like that. Let's go into about 80%. And yeah, looks pretty clean. That's how you do perspective text. A few things to note. You will still have to deal with the weird blurriness on the bottom. As you can see, let's go into about 200. The little streaks that come from motion blurring, instead of it actually being its own like 3D model, are still going to be there. If you want to erase those, basically you just add another layer and you can merge it down. Other things like in between the layers right here sometimes might not look as good, whereas over here on the E you can still see a little bit of a difference between the E and the R. Over here by the P it still looks like it's there's something in between there, but overall from right here it doesn't look half bad. You can scale it down even further because like we said in the beginning, this is a YouTube thumbnail, so if this was realistic, this would be your whole thumbnail and this would be taking up a majority of your screen. So you can go to about, let's cut it in half and go to 600. What do I have selected right now? Let's cut it in half and go to about 500, sorry. So now that looks great. It looks super realistic, really clean, and you're basically taking advantage of the fact that it is shrunk down. It preserves all of the detail without it being too, you know, jagged or blurry or whatever. You could also add, let's undo the scaling on that one. Let's go to open as layers, and then we're just gonna grab a texture or effect, whatever you want to call it. We're gonna add alpha channel since it didn't have one. You do grain merge, and then let's go to about 50%. Colors, hue saturation. We're going to take away the saturation. Go to brightness and contrast. Let's bring up the brightness to about 20. And let's bring up the contrast to about 40-ish, maybe. Then if we don't like where it's at on the picture, we could just select our move tool. And there we go. Whatever you want to do, whatever fits your purposes. So now we can merge visible layers, and now we have a sweet looking texture or effect on our text that we just worked so hard to make. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So if you guys enjoyed this video, let me know down in the comment section below. Leave it a thumbs up. If there's anything you are confused about, also let me know. I'll be making more guides in the future. I'm really into this, so I really enjoy doing videos like this because I spend a lot of time on my thumbnails, however good or bad they might be. But I figured this could help some of you guys out, and that's why I wanted to start this sort of how-to series on my channel. Anyway, thank you guys so much. You guys have been great. I have been the Danger Moss, and I will see you next time.